Avast a Kraken. The mast of the ship creaked as the wind blew. Vandar sat atop the crow's nest with his eye scope. The last week on the Harbinger had been brutal. The ship had almost sank several times, but the unity and strength of the crew prevailed thus far. The whaling ship was on a return voyage, the stocks full of their treasure, but lacking in supplies. Vandar leaned in and squinted as he gazed across the horizon. Alas, no land to behold. He sighed and put the glass away. He reached into his ragged would-be shirt and pulled out his flask. He raised it to his lips and shook it fiercely. He suckled upon it for the last drop, but none came. He shoved the sour-tasting bottle back into his jacket. He climbed down the mast to tell the captain he saw no land. Captain Frederick Servain was a legendary whaler among the royalty. He had made his wealth through bargains of territorial fishing licenses and whaling permits. Having a monopoly on most of the Atlantic at this point, he was now in it for the thrill of the kill. He looked over at Vandar and placed his arm around his neck, nearly squeezing the worn old man to death. "We be good, mate. None take what we squander. Remember, if you see it, I own it." He laughed as he looked back to his men. "The way I see it, boys, only those with the will to survive will ever try to venture these parts. I consider myself a twice dead man in my life, so what is a third, right?" The men gave a cheer at his usual speech. It worked. That was what counted. The hardships of the past they had endured because of their faith in him. His skill as a navigator and his knowledge of the seas compiled with his logistical capabilities, mapping and surveying, had always gained him more than he could ever ask for. Grayman, a gruff, burly man with muscles that appeared to be bursting from his body. He was a master of ropes, and he had saved the ship many a time from the tides, waves, and wind herself. He felt something stirring in the air, ever since that unmistakable earthquake. Never in his 40 years at sea had he seen waves so high. What could have caused such a monstrosity in the middle of nowhere? His hair stood on end as he gazed over the railing, watching the ship glide through the stirring sea. It was not the calm of such absent wind. It was something more. He sturdied the ropes in his hands as he tied the mast in place. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. The red, orange, and purples of dawn drew all the sky ablaze. He loved night watch. The sunrise was his sacred moment in this lost place. He never felt quite at home on land. That was what set him to the sea. But now here, he had seen long ago, it was not just the land, for the sea had not been the one to call either. It had not been for a place or a calling. It had been for a time. Since he had discovered this, the sea seemed the most fitting to him. Travel to far lands and see odd sunrises. But he had always loved the open sea for the lack of obscurity, the majesty of this sight clasped between her bosom. Grayman jolted and pressed his foot hard against the railing to steady himself. "All hands above deck!" he bellowed as he felt another wave crash against the ship. Had the watch fallen asleep? There was no call of wind or a storm. Why would the waves be so mighty as to press us noticeably? He thought to himself. The light of the newborn dawn was streaking across the sea, unveiling the harrowing design by which this evil was cast upon them. A whirlpool spread its tendrils of broken surface across the cleansing surface of the sea, its depths drawing a maw apart with such vast dilation that it swore to swallow the ship whole. "Burst from the depths the beast did, my eyes but to behold the horror," the thoughts like needles in his head as he stared towards his doom. The captain called to action. "Men, take stations! Ready the cannons!" The burst of waves as the creature's arms thrust from the water in all directions. The ship was surrounded, headed for the gaping mouth of the Leviathan. The men scrambled to fire their cannons, the iron striking the Kraken with a mighty impact, driving several of its arms into the depths of the sea. From the sight of the naive, it was finished. For those who knew such things as miracles do not happen to men. "Hold fast! Prepare your weapons! Grab your muskets, men! We march upon this beast!" The tentacles of the Kraken wrapped around the ship as if to draw it to the maw with unwavering hunger. The men charged with cutlass and knife in hand. They stabbed the creature and climbed upon its flesh, using their weapons as leverage to scale to its face. "The eyes!" Frederick shouted as he shot his musket into the eye of the creature. It writhed, and the men who were unsturdied were wrenched from their swords and cast into the ocean. The screams dying as the splash of the water parting took them in its sweet slumber. Frederick looked in horror as he stabbed the creature's eye. The ship was beyond repair. Their loot was lost. He was burned with fury. How could this be his end? He said to himself as he pulled his rifle from his back and shot the lead into the beast. He retreated as Grayman came behind him and fired his musket towards the creature's eye. It burst, bloodied and swelling, oozing with viscous liquid. The men steadied as the creature tried to shake them off. It was futile. They had dug in like barnacles. "Retreat!" called the captain as he pulled back his sword and leapt from the face to one of the arms of the creature and then to the bow of the ship. He ran towards the cannon and shouted for men to help him turn it. They aimed the cannon at the beast and fired. The tentacles gave way and released the ship. The Kraken screamed a guttural, watery gurgle as it timidly slunked beneath the waves, the scars upon its body a testament to its resolve and hunger. The men scrambled to gather all the loose materials and supplies they could as the ship began to sink. Grayman gathered up all the extra loose rope, tying sturdy knots as he snapped barrels and bent planks, securing them into a makeshift raft. The remaining men gathered in the early morning light as the sun beat down upon them, the adrenaline and rush of the encounter now leaving them regal to the fact that none shall believe them if they were ever found. Frederick was glad his men were safe and alive, for as long as he returned to shore with head and body and heart and filled with blood, his empire would still be there to greet him.